So apparently the US military is everywhere in the world. So I actually know about that particular fact. I know that they're almost everywhere. I don't know whether they're in my country. I don't think they're in my country, but I'll be finding out in this video where exactly the US military is in everywhere, but let's see where they are in the world. If you are new here, subscribe to the channel and help me out and hit that like button if you enjoyed this reaction. Let's get right into it.
Imagine a world where the most powerful country on Earth in 2021 wasn't the United States, but rather Spain.
What?
And instead of setting up military bases just in their own country, they also set up bases all around the world. Lots of those bases are in former colonies, but also there's a bunch in the United States. Just imagine this. You zoom into Fayetteville, North Carolina, and you see a huge military base. But it's not a US military base, it's a Spanish base on American soil, with lots of homes for the Spanish soldiers and their families.
Would that really happen?
Powerful weapon systems, aircraft, all run by the Spanish military. Go inside of one of these bases and it's all Spanish restaurants. Americans can't come in here unless they work for the Spanish government. And then imagine 100 more of these, all throughout the United States on American soil, and hundreds of more throughout the world. Or shift the scenario a little bit. What if it was a country that wasn't our ally? A country like China? What if they had military bases, not in the US, but right up close to our border? Powerful weapon systems right off our shores in islands in the Caribbean. If you're an American, you have to imagine what that would feel like.
Wait,
if you're not an American.
I mean, the way he just put it now, the way he just put this thing now, that doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for the US at all. Like I know Americans probably watch this video and I know you're patriotic and I understand that. But like the way he just put it, imagine if that actually happened. And this now brings me to the whole Ukraine war stuff now. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to say things that may get my channel banned. But that was the same argument that Putin was making when he was talking about the fact that US could, if Ukraine joins NATO, US could put army bases by close to their border and all that. But like the way this guy does put this thing now, it sounds very, very terrible. Damn.
And it's likely you already kind of know what this feels like. The United States has an extensive network of military bases outside of our borders. Hundreds of bases. I've been fascinated for a very long time about understanding these US foreign bases abroad, but I've never actually taken the time to accurately map them. So let's do it. Let's map every single US military base around the world. It turns out that's a huge task.
This is the story of the men of the United States Army who made this project possible, and of man's never-ceasing quest for knowledge.
This is a full armored division. To give you an idea of size, each of those small dark squares includes more than 1,000 men.
The United States military is bigger than any of us can really fathom. It's so big that even the US military doesn't know how big the US military is.
Crazy.
Back in 2018, 1,200 independent accountants and analysts came in to try to audit the US Department of Defense. To basically try to get like a paper trail of how big this thing is, how much money it spends, etc. And the Department of Defense didn't pass the audit. Like they literally did not have the documents or the knowledge to really piece together a full scope of what this organization is, how big it is, how much money it spends. So we don't know. Nobody knows how big the Pentagon is in all of its forms. All we do know is that objectively, it is one of the, if not the largest and most powerful organization on the planet and in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a organization that's more powerful than the Department of Defense in the history of humans, like, let me know. I want to know about it. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing bigger and more powerful than the United States military in 2021. And much of the US military is not actually in the US, but is actually outside of our borders, all around the world.
This post is somewhere in Germany, overlooking a sector of the Iron Curtain.
One of the first things that Joe Biden and his administration did when they came into power a couple of weeks ago down the road was ask for an assessment of how big is our military presence around the whole world? What is our strategy? And what actually does this presence look like?
The department will conduct a global force posture review of U.S. military footprint, resources, and strategies.
Footprint. I like that. That's like a nice thing. Like, what's our footprint? How big is our footprint around the world? We don't really know. The Pentagon is going to start to try to assess that. So let's help the Pentagon out and try to map every single United States base around the entire world. Let's do it. It wasn't too long ago when I used to think that having military bases in other countries was totally normal. Like, doesn't every country have like military bases in other countries? Yeah. Anyway, this was sort of reinforced for me when I was in college. I did an internship at NATO, with the headquarters of NATO, which was in Brussels. To get this job, I had to get a secret security clearance from the US government in order to enter the military base, which was NATO. This was really cool because there was always like people coming through NATO that I got to meet, like my diplomacy hero, Madeleine Albright, who used to be the Secretary of State, or this guy.
It's a great honor representing my country abroad for the
Who is this
last
guy?
37 years.
Good old Joe.
Oh,
Hey Joe,
that's Biden.
I had no idea you'd be president someday.
His face looks different.
Anyway, the big benefit of having this secret security clearance is that I could go into any military base anywhere. And so on Saturdays, I would drive an hour from Brussels to a little village in the Belgian countryside where a military base had been sort of plopped down in the middle of the Belgian countryside, in between like stone walls and quaint streets and sheep and farming plots. Yeah, it's a little blurry in this map because it's, you know, a military base and sometimes they blur the satellite imagery. Nothing I can do about it, sorry. And as soon as I entered into the base, went through all the security and I was in the base,
That is
I
crazy.
felt
like you can't actually zoom into that place. Like it's actually blurred. How do they do that? Seriously. How is it done? Guys, help me down in the comments. Like I will use a satellite and I want to like zoom in. I cannot. What? And it will be blurred. How? What do they do? It's like they put some kind of Iron Man suits around the place. Like what the hell?
I had left Belgium and was suddenly entering Suburban America.
Welcome to the United States.
There was a Taco Bell and movie theaters with American movies and all sorts of shops and like yoga studios and like a grocery store that had all of the products that I was very used to, all at the same prices I could get them in the United States, even though they had been flown across the Atlantic and brought to this place, which is a very expensive thing to do. It was a dream for me as a poor college kid living in Brussels and feeling a little bit homesick, to be honest. I hadn't really figured out culture shock at this point. So yeah, I kind of loved it. And I was, again, sort of like, doesn't everyone have military bases in other countries and they can sort of just go to their military base? And it was just, I was so naive. Alas, I've learned the truth.
Wow.
Luckily, I was able to talk to somebody who literally wrote the book on US military bases abroad.
Most US bases abroad look like not so small US towns.
Over the years, David has been researching and compiling a database of all the US bases around the world. The result is a very detailed audit that hasn't really ever been done to this degree. In fact, a few years ago, the Pentagon's own research arm, the RAND Corp, was doing some research on military bases abroad. And instead of using the Pentagon's list of US military bases abroad, these guys used David's list.
Wow.
Like they used David, he was like, he's a professor. He's like an anthropologist. He's not like a part of DOD. And yet they're like, this list that he made is actually more authoritative than like the Pentagon's own list.
I mean, I'm sort of honored, but it's not a good sign if the Pentagon research arm is using my list and not the Pentagon's own list.
So I got a hold of David's list and started wrestling with the data and finding a way to display it on a map so that I could get every single base to show somehow. After a few weeks of doing this, I finally have a map. And that map looks like this.
Is that my country? It can't be.
Every dot on this map is a US military base or installation of some sort in a different country. Many of these dots are not placed exactly where the base is because many of these bases are clustered in areas, and if I tried to map them all in the exact spot where they really are, they would all just sort of stack on top of each other and you wouldn't really be able to see them. But these dots represent every single base outside of the United States, from huge complexes the size of Rhode Island to small airstrips, little facilities that only house American drones or radar or supplies. This is all of them, and at least all that we know of. And if you look at this map and you see a base that you know of that is not here, or one that is there that doesn't belong there, tell me about it. I want to know, because this is sort of hard information to ascertain. The Pentagon is not very transparent, and neither are host countries about where certain bases are and why they exist.
Many of the bases around the world are their existence is due to an agreement between the two countries that is often not open to the public, that is secret.
Any errors here are mine and not David's. All in all, the number here is about 750. 750 US military bases, big and small, outside of the United States. By outside of the United States, I'm including US territories that are not equal to the United States, like Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. But in reality, we probably don't know the real number because
it's probably up to 1,000.
Data just simply is not transparently available to us. There are a couple major clusters here where the most bases exist. One major one is Germany, and the others are Japan and South Korea. These are basically holdovers from World War II and the subsequent Korean War, when the US, who won the war, came in and occupied these countries in order to set up a new government, write a new constitution, and to help the post-war transfer to a new government. But what's most interesting to me aren't these clusters that came about because of World War II, but instead the far-flung, sort of unexpected or little-known places that the US military has a little footprint. Like all the dots in Africa, which have popped up in recent years as the US has expanded its presence there. These are usually small installations that hold maybe a few soldiers or mainly private citizens who are government contractors. And they mainly house things like drones or radar or weapon systems. You also have this cluster of dots deep in the Indian Ocean, which is the island of Diego Garcia, which I've talked about at length, about the US military's role in displacing hundreds of local people to set up a base there. Some of these dots are just airstrips, a runway in the middle of nowhere. And these runways usually belong to the host country, and the US just rents them for a period of time. Like this facility in the middle of the desert in Oman. Places like this exist to hold supplies in case a war breaks out.
Wow.
So the US maintains these stockpiles of war supplies all around the globe so that they can strike at any point without having to ramp up a war economy at home. It takes away a lot of the friction from going to war.
They've made it easier for the US military to launch offensive wars. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were easier to launch because the US has maintained a huge infrastructure of bases.
Some of these dots don't represent a place where US soldiers are actually stationed, but instead it represents where money from the Pentagon has gone to influence or build up infrastructure. For example, in Iceland, the US is spending a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, to upgrade this airport, the airport that we all go through when we're going to Iceland, but doing it for military purposes so that the US can use it, can land there if needed.
Wow.
So next time you land in Iceland on your way to the Blue Lagoon, just know that you're passing by one of these little dots. Over here in the Azores, these islands that are owned by Portugal, nearly 2,000 kilometers away from any landmass, there is a group of US military installations mainly used for refueling and weapon storage. Head up here to Greenland and you'll see a little base way up high, the most northern base in the world where 140 Americans live.
Wow.
That looks interesting.
140.
I'd love to go there someday. Way out here in the Pacific, you've got loads of remote military bases owned by the United States. They're mainly small airstrips, like this base on the southern tip of this huge atoll of the Marshall Islands. So, if you don't live next to a military base, I want to hear from you, like, what are your thoughts about this? Whether you're an American or not an American, like, does this seem right? Does this seem like the right choice, the right thing?
I won't lie. It doesn't seem right. That's just my honest opinion. It seems so invasive. I don't know. It seems so invasive. And I get it. Maybe there is some good intentions to it. I understand that, but it just seems so invasive. And this just reminds me of the last video I just watched about Osama. I wasn't happy that the US were stationed in Saudi Arabia and all that. I mean, and I can assure you that it is not only Osama that is not happy about things like that. A lot of people are definitely not happy about that. A lot of people in those host countries are not happy about that. So I don't really know. I'm not really sure how I feel about it personally. I'm just learning this for the first time actually. So I've not had enough time to think about it. I've always known that the US has bases all over the place. But I just didn't know it was like the way he actually explained it in the beginning there, like the way, how he put it in that beginning part of the video was really, really chilling. And he put it in a way that it actually made the US sound like a bogeyman kind of. Anyway, I really don't know how to feel about this, to be honest.
For our taxpayer money to be going towards. I'm still making up my mind on a lot of this stuff, and I want to start a discussion. My goal in this video was to just map it, was to just look at it, be able to see it on a map, and I've finally done that.
Man, that was actually a very, very chilling video, really. It was a very chilling video, and it's something I've always known that the US has bases everywhere, but I've never really thought of it this way, especially with the way he put it at the beginning of the video. And what this thing actually shows me right now shows me that all these countries like China, Russia, and which other countries, but they do the whole poppy and all this stuff with the US. These countries have no chance. They have no chance outside of a nuclear war. That's just the fact. Like, there's nothing except maybe an economic war. But like that, I'm talking about in terms of like pure military, just military. This just shows that these countries have no chance whatsoever. I don't think any of those two countries have bases all over the place like the US. I doubt that. So it just shows that these countries have no chance whatsoever. So all these, this bravado that these countries do, I don't really know why they do it. I guess maybe because they have nuclear weapons. But would they actually ever use it? I don't think any of these countries, I don't think any country has the balls to use a nuclear weapon. I just don't think so. Because it's going to be mutually assured destruction, and I don't think any of these countries are crazy enough to do it. Now, there are countries that if they had that stuff, I would have been, I'm not going to mention the countries, those kind of countries. But the countries that do have the nuclear weapons, I don't think they will ever use it. Anyway, that was a very nice video to learn new things. I hope you guys enjoyed the reaction. Thank you for watching. Peace.